La Paz, Bolivia, one of the most unique cities you'll ever visit. Let's dive into everything you need to know before going. All right, so you're planning a trip to Bolivia and you're probably very confused as I was when planning my trip there a few weeks ago in September of 2023. There's a lot of unknown in terms of the visa and immigration process, and then in terms of La Paz, kind of the same way. There's just not a whole lot of information out there about the city, so I figured I'd make a video to help you guys out. So let's get right into it. Okay, so when you're flying in here, you're going to be flying into El Alto International Airport, which is the city that sits directly above La Paz. As you can see here on the line that I've drawn, La Paz sits down in this valley almost, and then you have to drive up the hill to get to El Alto, which is the other city. So that's the city that you fly into, and then you'll drive down into La Paz when you first arrive there. This leads me into the immigration and visa process, and my God, let me tell you how confusing this was. Bolivia by far is the toughest country I've ever had to travel to in terms of all the requirements that are listed on their website of needs before going to Bolivia. So when you first show up to the immigration section of the airport, there will be three separate lines. To the far left will be for Bolivian citizens. The middle section is for people who already have a visa. And then the third line is for people who need to get a visa. This was not communicated whatsoever, so everybody went to the middle line, and then after about an hour of waiting in the line, we finally got to the front and they told us we need to go to the other line. So just kind of a crazy situation to start off. Then we got to the front of the line, which is where you need to apply for the visa. Now you do this with someone behind the booth. Now this is where they list all the things that you need to give them. So you'll need to hand them your passport, obviously, and then you also need 2 passport photos that you can get at either CVS or Walgreens. Then you need a photocopy of your hotel reservation or hostel or Airbnb, proving that you're staying somewhere in Bolivia. Then you'll need a paper copy of your form of exit of the country. So a plane ticket or a bus ticket will do, proving that you are in fact leaving Bolivia at some point. Then you need a photocopy of your passport, which that I didn't know. So make sure you have copies of your passport ahead of time. And then that is it in terms of the things that you need to hand over. And then they'll go through everything, stamp your passport, whatnot, and then it's a whopping $160 for the visa, which lasts 30 days. This is the tourist visa into Bolivia. So by far the most expensive one that I've ever had in all of my travels, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's sort of whatever. So there's a bunch of other things listed in the requirements on the website. You don't need to do the affidavit form. You can do that at the airport. And then you don't need to show them a bank statement. And then you don't need the yellow fever vaccination. I didn't know that beforehand. It was very confusing because there's very, very little information on that. But apparently at higher altitudes, yellow fever is not a risk at all, so you don't need to present a vaccination card. Now at lower elevated cities, I don't know if that's the case, but I'm speaking just for La Paz. You do not need the yellow fever vaccination. So another very important thing to note then is all of those documents that you need to hand over have to be photocopies. So you have to print it out on a piece of paper. I don't believe you can show them a screenshot on your phone because they took all of that documentation and never gave it back to me. So make sure to print those out on paper before going to Bolivia. And then another thing too is you can pay the visa with card. You don't need cash, as it'll say on the website. So then after all of that, finally I was admitted into Bolivia. So quite the process, but hopefully that helps break it down. If you have any questions at all about that, feel free to comment and I can try and help you out as best I can. So now getting from the airport into La Paz, you can use Uber. It was pretty easy for the most part. I think it costs about $10 US to get from the airport to the city. However, you can use taxis as well if you can somehow get cash at the airport and the Bolivian peso. Now, in terms of where to stay, I'd probably recommend going with Sopocachi, San Pedro, or Centro. We stayed in Sopocachi, and a very centrally located neighborhood, very nice neighborhood in La Paz. So I don't think you really can go wrong. There's lots of hostels, lots of Airbnbs and hotels. So just look on that. It should be pretty cheap for the most part, and everything is pretty centrally located, so you should have no trouble getting around via foot. Now, after all that, you'll finally be ready to set out and start exploring La Paz. And immediately, you'll notice the altitude here. So La Paz is the highest elevated city in the entire world, sitting at right about 12,000 feet, which is pretty gnarly if you ask me. The highest that I had ever been before that was 12,600 feet in Flagstaff, Arizona. So this was a huge shock to me, but I handled it pretty well. Just make sure you're very, very hydrated going into it. And maybe if you can somehow access higher elevations in the month or two leading up to the trip, that would help tremendously. That's what I did in Flagstaff. So I did a little bit of like altitude training on my bike and then some hikes up to higher elevation. And I think it went a long way in helping me here in La Paz. Now, you can also take medication as well, or you might just get sick. That's part of the deal. Hopefully not, but if so, just maybe bring medication with you to help alleviate some of the pains that you can receive from the high altitude. It really is no joke in Bolivia, but just make sure to take your time, take deep breaths, and you should be fine for the most part, I would think. Now, in terms of just walking around, this city is very, very crazy. One of the crazier cities that I've ever experienced in my life. But just the layout of the city is so unique, and there's so many cars. The pollution is wild. So many more people than I ever would have thought out and about, which makes it interesting. It's very, very authentic. There's not a ton of tourists to my knowledge of what I saw there, especially Americans. Very, very few Americans there, which made for a unique experience for myself and my dad. Walking around there was just very cool to interact with the locals, made for a very, very cool experience. And you can definitely see the authenticity on display in terms of the Andean women. This is a very, very cool thing to witness as well. They're in their colorful outfits, a lot of older women too. These people work so freaking hard from sunrise to sunset every day, selling whatever they can to make however much money they can. Very, very cool to see that. So just be respectful of the culture while you're there and just observe it and take it all in, because it really is something to see. Now, in terms of things to do and see within the city, I don't have a whole lot of recommendations as I wasn't there for too long, and the other days I did day trips outside of La Paz. But the few hours that I did spend in La Paz, you can go see the Witches Market, which is near the Belen neighborhood. Very, very cool to see all of that. So many different textiles and colors in that area. A lot of restaurants, cafes as well that you can check out. The San Francisco Cathedral Church also sits very, very near there. That's very centrally located. And then from there, you can make your way across the street over into that area near Centro. So you can see here on the map, that's another cool area to see a lot. It's very, very hilly too, as you'll quickly find out. But I think it makes for a very unique city. And then another thing that we did was take the cable cars. So this is very, very cool and a great way to get an amazing view of La Paz. From those centrally located areas, you can take the purple cable car all the way up to El Alto. then take the silver cable car across to then connect to the yellow cable car to come down into Sopocachi. This is an amazing way to see a lot of La Paz and get a great vantage point from above the city. It's very, very unique, and I would highly recommend doing this, even if it's just for the ride. It's very cheap. I think it costs $3 total round trip, and you get great viewpoints of all of the mountains that surround the entire city. So definitely do that while you're in La Paz. Now, in terms of food, I also don't have a whole lot of recommendations. I didn't really get to endeavor too much in the food, probably because of the day trips, and I just wasn't feeling a lot of the authentic cuisine while I was there, so we didn't get to endeavor too much. However, I think if you do some research, you should be able to find some pretty interesting places in those areas and get some good meals. Now, another thing to touch on real quick would just be safety. I felt very safe the entire time here in La Paz, but just keep a good awareness at all times, and make sure you have your belongings secure. I've heard there can be pickpockets while walking around. Just make sure that you're mindful of that. But generally speaking, I think it's a very safe city to visit if you are an American or really any other nationality, to be honest. Now, in terms of transportation, you'll have Uber, taxis, and the cable car. I would definitely recommend going with the cable car, as there is a ton of traffic here in La Paz, and the cable car can get you from La Paz to El Alto much quicker than the taxi can. If you take a taxi to try and get to the top, it can literally take 45 minutes to an hour with the way the road system is getting up there. So if possible, try and go with the cable car. But for the most part, you should be able to walk around here quite fine and be able to see most of the city on foot. So that's transportation for you. Okay, and last point will be day trips and multi-day trips from La Paz. This is a huge hub for a lot of outdoor activities in Bolivia. So as you saw in my last two videos, we did the Death Road tour and then Tuni Condoriri and Pico Austria. These were two separate day trips, which each cost roughly about $70 average. Now these are full day trips, so 14, 15 hours worth of travel. So you really get your bang for your buck. Now there's a ton of other day trips that you can partake in. A lot of treks as well. You can climb some pretty gnarly mountains here in Bolivia. So definitely do some research into day trips and multi-day trips, as La Paz is a huge hub for all of these outdoor activities. Take full advantage, because it quite literally is amazing here in Bolivia with the scenery. But outside of that, I think this pretty much covers everything. Hopefully I communicated it well to you. If you have any questions at all, drop a comment below. I'll do my best to help you out and answer any of the needs that you might have. But I cannot say enough good things about La Paz, Bolivia. It really is the most unique place that I've ever been in the entire world. So much to see, so much to do, and so much to partake in while you're there. So I really can't recommend this place enough. So hope you guys enjoyed this video and were able to take away a few things from it. But we'll see you from the next videos in Peru. So stay tuned. We got a lot coming from there. A lot of beautiful scenery as well in Peru. So be sure to stay tuned for those videos coming very soon.